Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the October meeting of the Housing Opportunity Fund Advisory Board. We're going to be getting started in just 1 second. We apologize for the delay. Unfortunately, this month we do not have an ASL interpreter. However, the meeting is being live transcribed, so the words should be appearing at the bottom of your screen, and we do apologize for that, but we did have some cancellations. So we're going to go ahead and begin by calling roll. Lena Andrews.
Here.
Oliver Beasley.
I'm here.
Dr. Jamil Bey. Joanna Deming.
Here.
Knowledge Build Hudson. Jerome Jackson. Council President Teresa Kale Smith. Mark Masterson.
Here.
James Myers. He's here.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Paul Spradley. Sonia Tillman.
Here.
Derek Tillman. Diamante Walker. Adrian Wonaha.
Present.
I am also present, and Megan Winters. I believe is also here, but maybe struggling to get.
I saw her box.
I did tell her as well. She's here, and she did say good morning earlier. So with that, we will proceed to public comment.
Kelly, just a point of order. I'm counting that we have 15 members since the tenant is vacant. So 8 would be a quorum, would it not?
So that was my earlier question as to whether or not the quorum included that absentee or if it was just everybody who was currently on the board, because I think that 8 should be a quorum considering that is a vacant seat.
Yes, I believe that the way that the rules were written is that it was a majority of, seats that were filled.
Mm-hmm.
Thought we had agreed on a solid 9.
So I believe we agreed on 9, but I think it is 50% plus 1. But I think we might have to go back in and make sure that that's 50% of filled seats plus 1 versus available seats. So I think we can take a reread of the bylaws and perhaps adjust that under administrative items going forward, just so that there's clarity on that, because we did have a delay to get to the full 9. That may or may not be actually necessary to do moving forward. So yeah, we definitely should look into that. I'm sorry, before public comment, we have to review and accept the minutes from our September 2nd meeting. Apologies, I'm excited that we have so much. We have a robust public comment section today, and so I tried to skip ahead. Apologies. Has everyone had the opportunity to review our September minutes?
Motion to approve.
All right.
I second that motion.
That was Mark and Adrian. Any questions or comments? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstentions? Okay. The minutes for September 2nd have been approved. And now we will move on to public comment. Our first public commenter is Aaron Erb.
Hello, good morning, HOS Advisory Board members. It's good to be with you, even with a bit of a delay. I'm Aaron Erb. I'm the Executive Director of Just Mediation Pittsburgh. We mediate between landlords and tenants to help avoid evictions, and I work with the legal assistance program that the HOF has set up this year. So I'll be myself and 3 colleagues from Rent Help PGH, Neighborhood Legal Services, and Community Justice Project, who work with the HOF's legal assistance program for tenants, which we'll call LAPT. We'll be reading from a statement we sent to the URA, which was distributed to the advisory board members this week. We wanted to convey and outline our understanding of the LAPT project as it currently is, and our reasons as to why additional funding should be allocated to the LAPT program by the Housing Authority Fund Advisory Board in order to adequately meet the need of Pittsburgh residents, both as they currently are in the midst of this crisis, and as those needs almost certainly escalate as protections expire and time wears on in the pandemic. So the first thing we wanted to address was invoicing delays, but also spend down projections for the current year that we have. So while delayed invoicing and normal hiring procedures have led to somewhat misleadingly low usage rates of funding allocated for LAPT services, these regular startup delays are mostly behind us, and we expect to more than catch up in the coming year to spend down this money. Even before receiving LAPT funding, for example, Neighborhood Legal Services had been working to expand its team. They've hired a number of new staff members, restructuring and reorienting their housing program to better serve tenants in need, and are expecting and on track to spend down their full allocation of LAPT before the end of the spending year. NLS has not had a shortage at all of LAPT referrals. Nearly all of the tenant referrals that come in through LAPT are at 30% AMI and below. While many of the referrals come through LAPT coordinated entry, NLS likewise is a well-known resource in the community, as you know, particularly related to their expertise developed through many years of handling evictions in public and subsidized housing. From my end at Just Mediation Pittsburgh, we're moving ahead as expected and expecting to spend down our portion accordingly of LAPT. The only potential shortfall would be related to our community mediator payments, where we pay community members to mediate these landlord-tenant disputes. We might spend about half of the allocated $15,000 that we budgeted for that, but besides that, we will move through all of our funding, and some additional outreach efforts that we've joined together with Rent Help PGH for should have us spending down our projections and probably exceeding them as we mediate landlord-tenant disputes. I will give up the rest of my time as my colleagues take it from here. Thank you.
And for the record, our next public commenter is Magda Gangwar.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is Magda Gangwar, and I work in the Rent Help Pittsburgh Help Desk as a resource navigator. So every day, I am one of the people that is on the phone with city residents who are facing eviction and in desperate need of legal assistance. And I do perform a great deal of referrals to the legal assistance program, which I will refer to henceforth as LAPT. So Rent Help Pittsburgh has hired additional staff and is on track to spend down their portion of funding for coordinated entry, likely ahead of schedule. Other than a slight delay in invoicing, the initial invoice reflects 3 months of coordinated entry, but no spending towards outreach. However, as I'll elaborate on in the future, LAPT outreach is now up and running smoothly, and we expect to fully spend down this portion of the allocation as well. So the in-person portion of the outreach for the LAPT program started over 3 months ago after the program itself became online in mid-May. While mailers have been going out to every Pittsburgh resident tenant facing an eviction for whom we have an address, it is this in-person outreach planned and executed by dedicated staff that can and already is proving quite effective to connect people with services. After Rent Help Pittsburgh conducted the hiring process, trained and set off our new staff on their way, we have seen a significant increase in the referrals to the LAPT providers. The first full week of dedicated LAPT outreach was the week of September 29th, 2021, I apologize. It yielded 17 tenant referrals for legal assistance and mediation. This is over a 2-fold increase in referrals, up from an average of 8 per week. As our processes continue to become more efficient and expansive and our staff become more experienced, we only expect this increase to continue. The outcome will be plenty of referrals for all providers that are able to serve. However, the limiting factor will likely be the funding and resulting capacity, as those in need are able to be connected to the very providers that could assist them. So I'm going to yield the rest of my time. I did want to say that, I am somebody who is on the phone directly with people in crisis every single day, and this program has proved invaluable to them, not just for a limited legal consultation, but also it's been a great help with people filing appeals. Unfortunately, I do not have the knowledge or bandwidth to provide legal assistance, and this program has really been invaluable. So thank y'all for your work, and I will give the rest of my time up to, I believe, Adam, or the public.
And that would be Adam DeBow for the next public commenter. Thank you.
Hi all, my name is Adam Debo. I am a managing attorney at Neighborhood Legal Services in the housing group, also working as a staff attorney handling litigation cases personally as well. So the third point we wanted to touch on was the artificially low filing numbers and the drawn out eviction process that have slowed down the timeline. With that being said, we do know that there is going to be an expected kind of tsunami of a housing crisis ahead because of this artificial timeline. So beyond the concerns that Aaron and Magda have already addressed, another necessary need for adequate funding being allocated to the LAP program, and likely much more significant, is the eviction landscape that we've been operating in has been artificially mild. The potential for a coming wave of evictions is really not a matter of whether it will happen, but when it will happen. Certain protections that have been put in place, like the local and federal moratoria or other similar protections like the local court order, have been in place since before the beginning of the LAP program. And these protections have worked. Many filings have been prevented or they've been discouraged. And in other cases, the cases that have been filed have been delayed or resolved prior to any disposition. But the issue here is that the effect on these filings has served to deflate the number of overall proceedings that would have otherwise been filed. They provide only temporary comfort to the households that are on the cusp of housing instability. And those households will be vulnerable as soon as these protections are lifted or weakened. The same is true for those cases that are currently in the legal system that have been delayed, resulting in instances where cases have been continued for months and months, but will soon lead to potential evictions once these protections are lifted. This has really changed the landscape for legal services and other resources. And the same is true for other types of protections as well, like the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. This program and the massive amounts of funding and assistance it has provided to the community has unquestionably averted some evictions that would have otherwise been filed and allowed some tenants to remain in their homes when they would have likely been forced to move by getting necessary funding to both landlords and tenants. However, an ERAP application alone, the Emergency Rental Assistance Program, does not protect the family from eviction. Currently, under Judge Clark's order, it does to some extent, but unfortunately, most of these safeguards are set to expire after October, and there is almost certainly nothing that will be replacing that, at least on the federal level, likely on the local and state level as well. It's unlikely that this will happen, and as such, every single family with a currently pending ERAP application, which in Allegheny County is over 11,000 applications, will suddenly become fully exposed to the threat of eviction basically overnight once November 1st rolls around. It's imperative that we have as much legal mediation and resource navigation in addition to legal assistance as possible and support ready for them when that time comes and we inevitably face the housing crisis that we will. With that, I will cede the rest of my time as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And up next, we have Swain Uber.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I know a big chunk of you, but my name is Swain Uber. I'm an attorney with Community Justice Project and help coordinate amongst all of our partners the wonderful LAPT program that this board was, had the foresight to create and fund last year. So I'll touch on the last topic. Unfortunately, the currently proposed annual allocation plan for 2022 would not allow us as the service providers to meet all of these challenges that my colleagues discussed head on. Approximately $1 million was allocated to the LAPT program for a full calendar year this year in mid-May 2021. This funding was scheduled to run until the following year, more or less, at an average allocation of approximately nearly $3,000 per day. However, under the current allocation that would be proposed for the remainder of the 2022, only, I believe, either 200,000 or 250,000 what would be there to sustain the program at the same level from a period of mid-May, when the program began last year, and then this year, 2022, till the end of December 2022, which is a period of 230 days. If this allocation is held at that amount, the daily funding would drop by nearly $2,000 to about $800 or $900 per day, a cut of nearly 70%. Upon sustaining such a restriction of funds, the service providers would simply not be able to function at the same capacity that's currently designed. And many residents of Pittsburgh would be without the support that they need to maintain their homes in their greatest hour of greatest need. In order to continue funding at the same level, what would be necessary for services to be maintained and not even expanded. An allocation closer to 600,000 would be necessary to allow all of us to provide, to our fellow Pittsburghers who are struggling to provide services to our fellow Pittsburghers who are struggling to keep a roof over their heads in this still ongoing pandemic. So we sincerely request that you all, as the Housing Opportunity Fund Advisory Board, reconsider the current proposal for the allocation to the LAPT program and continue funding at current levels, if not expanding funding to allow us to staff up even more robustly to be prepared for the challenge that we know lies ahead. I just wanted to thank you all for your vision in even creating this program. We see every day the dramatic difference between people who happen to live on one side of invisible barrier that is the city limits of Pittsburgh, and the amount of support and the energy and funding that goes towards keeping people in their homes is frankly incredible. And it breaks our heart every time when we don't get to refer people to this program, because we do work with people outside of the city. And yeah, without this program, it's rough going. So we ask that you fund it at the same levels, obviously prorated for the remainder of that year. And yeah, we thank you all for your time.
Thank you. Up next is Megan Conforham.
Good morning, everybody. I have 3 points I want to make this morning. Let me introduce myself. If anyone's forgotten due to my absence in recent months, my name is Megan Conforham. I am the Executive Director of the Fair Housing Partnership. As we talk about housing, I want to make sure everyone is aware that HUD announced yesterday that HUD will be issuing a guidance or rule on federally subsidized housing and the prohibition of evicting tenants in coming months based on owed rent. And so for the HOF to be particularly mindful of its partners and working on what its partnered policies are regarding the eviction due to non-payment of rent during COVID-19. Additionally, I want to raise a good fact is that FHP prevailed in the past month in federal litigation regarding the protections of survivors of domestic violence within the Fair Housing Act. You may understand the difference in making a treatment and impact argument, and we prevailed on the motion to dismiss by a judge appointed by the previous federal administration that the victim, the survivor, had standing to be able to be released from her lease without penalty to flee her unit because her abuser was stalking her at the unit. So you'll be hearing more information from us as we are working to both raise awareness about the federal act protections for survivors, as well as the city. The city has a specific protection for survivors of domestic violence. And COVID-19, unfortunately, has increased the need for survivor resources because of isolating survivors within their abusive homes and the need to make sure that we are providing resources to help survivors flee. And then I also want to raise a frustration. I know that we are all incredibly busy. I myself am as well. And I am asking for a contact and a communication about what is occurring with the Fair Housing Committee. What is the fair housing conversations being had? Is that, my position is that I want to be a resource and to help and to put effort to create a tangible outcome of creating what is effectively a fair housing impact statement that proposals of housing development can provide to the HOF as a means of understanding what it is that we're building and developing in order to have an equity lens involved. I will raise for everyone's awareness is that you may have seen the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette look at the Pittsburgh Housing Authority disrepair of the HACP owned properties. And I will tell you, and this is not an attack, but a use of data, is to understand that irregardless of the massive complexities that go into the decision-making over decades that has led to the disrepair of those properties, is that the data is clear, is that the disrepair of the housing authority's properties in the city's limits is disproportionately hurting Black families. And our access and ability to provide Black families and families of color safe and affordable housing is a fair housing problem. And so I say this because I have a lot to work on, to collaborative information to build on, but I can't go chasing after begging to be involved. And so I simply ask is that I am interested to do tangible efforts in order to help us all better understand what our existing inequities are in order to address them with future decisions. And I simply ask to have meetings and discussions outside of this public facing monthly meeting in order to build on that work. I do appreciate the efforts that you do. And I wish everyone to be safe and healthy amidst the crisis that we are all going through right now.
Thank you, Megan. And our next public commenter is Christina Howe.
Sorry, I'm here. Struggling with my technology. My name is Christina Howell. I'm Executive Director of Bloomfield Development Corporation. I'm here today. I don't have the intense expertise that a lot of the speakers have, but I'm here today to talk about the experience in Bloomfield that I and my coworkers have witnessed over the last 18 months. We have had 63% of our neighborhood rent their homes. Many of them are longtime renters. And we are seeing that the current situation of the pandemic has really ramped up evictions, landlords trying to evict, and we know it's only getting worse in our neighborhood and projected to get much worse at some point soon. The legal services that are offered that other people have spoke to are extraordinarily important and have helped some of our residents be able to stay in their homes. And due to Rent Help PGH forming and working with communities in the city, we have been able to train one of my coworkers into doing intake in our neighborhood. And we are finding that the outreach that Rent Help has done and others have done here on this call has been increasing the number of people that have come to us. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem that there is much funding for outreach now. When there was, it really did work. So I'd like to ask that the funding in the proposed allocation from the current 200,000 go to 630,000 so that the program will be able to exist as it has and hopefully serve more people in a consistent manner. Should this funding be dropped down, that consistency, that help that has been so valuable to us, and in knowing that our residents are being helped through these intense processes that can be like another full-time job for them to navigate, as well as the residents just having someone there to lean on, like Magda, who spoke earlier, is really, really important. So with that, I thank everyone for their time, and I'll see the rest of my time.
Great. And we have one more public comment that I'm going to read into the record because he was unable to be present today, and it's from David Brennigan, who's the Executive Director of Lawrenceville United. Excuse me. Good morning. I'm unable to testify this morning, but wanted to submit some comments for the consideration of the Housing Opportunity Fund staff, the board, the advisory board, and the URA board in relation to the HOF budget for 2021-22 on behalf of Lawrenceville United. Lawrenceville United is an inclusive, resident-driven nonprofit dedicated to improving and protecting quality of life for all of Lawrenceville's residents. Excuse me. First, I want to emphasize how important the Housing Opportunity Fund is to people in our community. Lawrenceville United has supported dozens of residents to access Housing Opportunity Fund programs, and these have been absolutely critical to helping our residents access affordable and safe housing, stay in their homes, and address building code violations, accessibility barriers, and other necessary home repairs. In particular, we have seen high demand for the Homeowners Assistance Program, HAP, and we know that there will continue to be strong need for the Housing Stabilization Program funds. We also see strong demand for the Legal Assistance Program and believe that the 2022-23 funding should be increased to $1 million. These funds are critical for addressing a variety of legal matters that our residents face that lead to displacement from eviction, to habitability issues, to tangled titles, and avoiding foreclosure. Thank you for your consideration and all you do, David Brennigan. And that concludes our public comment. Next, we'll have a presentation from the City of Bridges Community Land Trust. This is part of the changes that we're making to our format that we discussed at our last meeting with the client story to kind of get a better idea of how funds are being spent and what the experience is on the other side of our programs. And today we're going to start with City of Bridges. So Ed Nusser, you are up next. You're up first.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, I'm Ed. I'm lucky enough to be the executive director at City of Bridges Community Land Trust. And thank you to Shana and Athena for reaching out and inviting us to share a little bit about our experience with our recently funded HOF funded project that just wrapped up last year. And so, yeah, I thought I'd begin with just a little bit of background about City of Bridges. So we are a nonprofit regional community land trust that serves the city of Pittsburgh and Allegheny County. We began operating in the spring of 2019, and we grew out of and were spun out of the Lawrenceville Corporation's land trust program, but we are now an independent nonprofit organization. And you can skip to the next slide. Really quickly, because I do like to always include this when I talk about why the work of community land trust is so important and sort of what the HOF is investing in when they support the creation of permanently affordable homes. So across the country, 90% of CLT homeowners stay in their homes for at least 5 years. Historically, and again, across the country, the national average is that CLT owners stay in their homes longer than market rate owners. So in sort of the quest to both stabilize individuals and stabilize communities, land trusts have proven to be a really powerful tool to create longer tenure for low-income homeowners in their homes. And then lastly, and I think most importantly, for the work of addressing systemic injustice and economic injustice, and righting, frankly, the last 400 years of wrongs of things that have been put in place in the real estate and lending world. Over 70% of low-income CLT homeowners, when they sell their CLT home, move on to access unrestricted market rate home ownership. We talk about this a lot being the first rung of the ladder of property ownership, that it can stabilize families, allow them to build equity, build wealth, and leverage that to move into market rate ownership, and then free that home up for another low-income family to begin that process for themselves. And this is really important. We know that there's a 2005 study from Washington University that showed that from the 70s to the 90s, almost half of low-income BIPOC households that were first-time home buyers lost their home within 5 years. And so when you look at CLT ownership, that produces 90% of owners staying in their home for more than 5 years. That's a counter to that challenge that we see. And then similarly, on the leverage to access market rate ownership, there's a 2006 HUD study that showed that for low and moderate income homeowners, the benefits of wealth creation of property ownership were tied to how long they stayed in their home and not to sort of rapid market speculation or rapid market appreciation. And so again, the longer that you're able to invest in keeping homeowners secure in their homes, for low and moderate income homeowners and for homeowners of color, the longer they're in their home, the more wealth they're going to create and the more stability they're going to enjoy. So with that, I'll kind of hop into the project that you all funded, but I wanted to provide the background of what you support. And then also really quickly, as a CLT, we are a membership organization. So every year, our membership elects my bosses. Our board is set up in sort of the classic community land trust model that reserves a third of our seats for folks that live in our homes, reserves a third of our seats for community representatives from the 13 neighborhoods that we currently serve. And then the final third is reserved for what we call our practitioner class, folks that bring a professional or lived experience to the board that help us fulfill our mission. And with that, I'll go into the project. Thanks. So the HOF funded a 6-unit rehab project that was scattered sites in lower and central Lawrenceville. It produced 5 2-bedroom homes, 1 3-bedroom home. Began in October of 19, which was a different world. Kind of fun to navigate construction pauses and starts in the midst of the spring of 2020. But we did complete the project in the summer, and the final home sold in December of 2020. Also in 2020, we managed our first 2 resales of City of Bridges homes in our portfolio. So we had 8 home sales of properties that were in Lawrenceville. And then we also closed on our first buyer initiated grant program, which is our down payment and closing cost assistance grant. Provides up to $35,000 in down payment, closing cost, or funds for repairs and updates for first-time low-income homeowners that are shopping on the market. Next slide. So of that 6-unit development that was funded through the HOF, the properties came to us through various channels. 2 from longtime property owners who have been in the neighborhood for decades and wanted to move on. They sold their home to us rather than listing it on the market. 2 homes came to us from a community-minded landlord who was in the process of retiring and sold his 2 vacant houses to us for renovation and sale. 1 came to us from the property reserve, and 1 was actually donated to us by Children's Hospital. It was a property that they had acquired, a kind of random standalone row house that they had acquired, and they donated it to us for it to be in our portfolio. The range of work really varied. There were 3 gut rehabs, 3 moderate renovations that had to happen. Obviously, the property reserve property was one of those gut rehabs, just given sort of the length of time the property reserve process can take. All of our homes were built to an Energy Star standard. So all Energy Star appliances, all paints, a sort of a matter of practice for City of Bridges. All paints in our homes are VOC free. All of our flooring is required from our contract standpoint. We require our contractors use Green Guard certified flooring throughout our homes in both carpet and on the vinyl plank flooring that goes into the first floor usually. And then again, always looking at how we can set homeowners up for success. And so pieces of that are in how do we invest in longer term, more durable materials for our homes. So fiberglass windows instead of vinyl, because we know fiberglass lasts twice as long and is much less toxic to produce. Hardy board siding instead of vinyl. Again, it lasts longer. It's healthier to produce. And then finally, the 6 homes were priced. The 2 bedrooms sold for $127,500 and the 3 bedrooms sold for $143,500. Next slide. And here are just some before and after shots, which I really miss the Steelers yellow in Plum Way. We couldn't keep that one, but so this is a before and after of Plum Way. This is a 2-bedroom home that was sold to a couple first-time home buyers. Next slide. And then this is 474 and 476 44th Street. 474 was sold to us by a longtime owner. 476 was the property owned by Children's Hospital. So this is directly across from the hospital if you're aware of sort of the intersection of 44th and Penn Avenue. You can see we restored the facades, brought back the historic window openings on 474. Also rebuilt the roofs and dormers of both houses. Next slide. And then this is our property reserve property. So this is 184 34th Street. As you can see, again, restored the first floor window openings and the original door openings to full height. Rebuilt the entire roof structure. The back half of the roof had collapsed. So the front half, we remained sort of the historic pattern with that single window dormer. The back, we actually brought the roof up to create a full height living space and an additional bedroom in the house, which this is a 12-foot wide row house. So the ability to create real living space on the third floor was really important for our end buyer there. And the person who bought this house is actually a first generation immigrant. Him and his parents came to America when he was a child as asylum seekers. And so now he's a homeowner on 34th Street. Next slide. We also have a partnership with Monmade, which is a program of Bridgeway Capital, where we source local makers and artisans to bring sort of local economic benefit to our real estate development projects. And so these are some examples of things that were made by makers in the Monmade program. So the shelving in the upper left corner there was done by a local woodworking firm, Temper and Grit. The backsplash is actually an off-the-shelf backsplash that was screen printed by Modesto, a screen printing artist out in East Pittsburgh. The light fixtures, it's kind of hard to see because it's a white light fixture, but that's sort of a Warhol homage. It's a soup can, glass blown light fixture that's done by a husband and wife glass blowing team, Vessel Studio Glass. And then the mailboxes were also handmade by Bones and All, another local maker in the Monmade program. All of these things did not add extravagant numbers to our budget. They were small pieces, but they create a value in the home. They create a sense of worth. We've had homeowners come through and be shocked at sort of this level of care that goes into our homes. We want people we believe that in addition to affordable, safe, healthy housing, people deserve beautiful housing, people deserve well-made housing. And the people who make those products deserve to have a place and a market to sell some of their beautiful work. Next slide. So I wouldn't be done if I didn't bring a little bit of sort of gray clouds to the story of the project. So as I said, we sold 8 houses in Lawrenceville last year. 4 of those went to BIPOC households. All 8 were first-time home buyers. 4 of the 8 were households of color. And this is something that I feel like we bring up and have to bring up every time we talk about this project. The median white home buyer who we served in 2020 had a credit score of 730. And when they purchased their home, they had a debt to income ratio of about 21%. The median household of color we served last year had a credit score of 663 and a debt to income ratio of 36.5. These are game-changing numbers, right? For a lot of mortgage qualification, 680 is the cutoff. We are thankful to have a bank partner that in First Commonwealth Bank and their mortgage portfolio product will serve individuals down to 620. But when you look at a lot of things that have a cutoff of 680, our median household of color last year wouldn't have gotten a mortgage. Similarly, at a debt to income of 36.5, our prices were really affordable. They were much below sort of what that maximum 80% AMI buyer could afford. But if we had priced them closer to what a max 80% AMI buyer could afford, our median household of color last year wouldn't have been able to afford that price because of the other debt that they are bringing to the table when they try to qualify for a house. Next slide. And then really quickly again, you'll hopefully be seeing myself and our real estate managers, Julie and Jordan, in the near future. We're building off of this work in Lawrenceville. We have 2 homes currently underway in East Liberty. And also over the next 12 months, we have planned groundbreaking in Polish Hill, Fineview, Hazelwood, Garfield, and East Hills. And so you'll be seeing hopefully a lot more of us in the near future.
Up next, we're going to be led in a conversation by Kyle Webster from Action Housing. Thank you for that, Ed. That was very informative. And you actually proactively asked all of the questions that I was scribbling and answered all of the questions that I was scribbling on my Post-it. So thank you for that.
That's great. Glad to be proactive.
Hi, everyone. I'm actually Natalie Ryan from Action Housing. Kyle Webster was unable to be here this morning, unfortunately, so I will be talking with you about the Emergency Rental Assistance Program. The Emergency Rental Assistance Program is a massive partnership between Allegheny County, City of Pittsburgh, Action Housing, Urban League of Greater Pittsburgh, and the YWCA of Greater Pittsburgh. Next slide shows you that we also have engaged with 22 smaller nonprofits throughout Allegheny County who are assisting us with helping folks apply who may have technology barriers and also running drop-in centers for people to go in if they also need assistance with applying for the program. The Emergency Rental Assistance Program is part of the Consolidated Appropriations Act of 2021 and the American Rescue Plan. Our initial allocation was $80 million for Allegheny County and the City of Pittsburgh. It will shift into ERAP 2, which will be about another $50 million. And the county has recently requested $98 million more to serve all of the folks that we currently have applications for. The program can provide up to 12 months of rent due on or after March 13th, 2020, with up to 3 additional months if funding is still available. ERAP 1 will go through September 2022, and ERAP 2 will go through December of 2024, pending availability of funding. To date, we have spent $41.5 million, which is just over half of our initial allocation, and served 6,600 households in Allegheny County. This application is primarily online. People can apply at covidrentrelief.alleghenycounty.us. If they don't have a cell phone or a computer at home, they can visit one of our 8 drop-in centers. We also can do an application over the phone if they call our hotline at Action Housing, which is 412-248-0021, and we will set up a time to help people apply over the phone. This shows you where our drop-in centers are. We try to space them throughout Allegheny County to make them as accessible as possible to folks. And we are also looking to expand possibly to another location in response to some spaces that we hadn't covered. So we are hoping to get to everybody in the county and give them a place that they can apply close to home if necessary. Landlords can initiate the application for emergency rental assistance. We do encourage them to work with their tenants because they do have to provide a login to the tenants so that they can give us the documentation that we need. We've done outreach to landlords to show them how they can do this with their tenants. Many are setting up events at their central locations so that folks can come and they can help them apply with technology and provide documentation to them. Next slide. In order to be eligible for emergency rental assistance, you must live in Allegheny County. The household has to have an income below 80% of the area median income. There has to be a COVID impact, which is loss of income, increase in expenses, or financial hardship. There has to be a risk of homelessness or housing instability, and there does have to be a valid lease, but that can be written or oral. The applications go through a 5-step process once they're submitted. In step 1, we do an inventory of what documents we have and what documents we need. In the second step, we outreach to tenants to obtain any documents that are missing. That's done by the YWCA, Action Housing, and 17 partner agencies. In step 3, we determine whether the applicant is eligible. In step 4, we do outreach to the landlord or the tenant, depending upon who we're going to pay the rent to. That's done by Action Housing and the Urban League. And in step 5, we do a final review and approve for payment and send out an award letter. Landlords are asked to provide a W-9, their payment information, and to let us know what amounts of rent the tenant owes. If landlords are not willing to participate in the program, we will pay the tenant directly. Payment will be initiated within 3 business days of us obtaining all the information we need. Paying someone via ACH takes about 2 to 10 days generally, and checks can take up to 15 days to receive. There is also a utility portion of the program. Folks apply in the same way that they do for rent. It is then automatically sent to Dollar Energy, where they can cover electric costs, gas or fuel oil, trash, water, and sewage. Folks just have to provide their statements from their utility companies. And we can also pay landlords directly for rent if that is covered under the lease, that the tenant pays that to the landlord directly. And again, if folks need to apply, they can apply at covidrentrelief.alleghenycounty.us. We have a hotline for questions, which is 412-248-0021. And you can also email rentalassistance@actionhousing.org. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Up next, we have the Housing Stabilization Program. There is some recommendations to increase contracts. I believe this presentation will be made by URA staff.
Hey, Brianna, you're muted right now.
Sorry about that. So good morning, Advisory Board. We are bringing these 3 items to your attention to amend the current contracts of providers in which we are already working with to avoid any delay in services to our residents. As you all know, HSP has transferred administration over to DHS. And to avoid any breaks in services, we have decided to increase the current contracts and not RFP, as they currently have capacity. So we are bringing this recommendation to increase YWCA's contract by $180,000 to be sourced by HOF 2021, Chartiers by $150,000 to be sourced by HOF 2021, and Urban League by $303,000 to be sourced by HOF 2021. And with Urban League, $245,000 will be utilized for rental assistance, and $58,000 will be utilized for mortgage assistance.
Does anyone have any questions?
Yeah, I do. Could you just tell me what Chartiers is? I've never heard of it.
Oh, Chartier Center. So they're an organization here within the city of Pitt, well, a little outside of the city, so Bridgeville. So they specialize in mental health services. So they're an organization that we've contracted with for the 2020 year to help spread the wealth around and to increase.
So why are we spreading it to the county? Why aren't we spreading it to another place in Pittsburgh?
Because these are the current contractors that are with DHS that have transferred over. So to avoid any breaks in RFPing those services out, we've decided to increase this contract, as we already increased Goodwill's contract by, I believe, $105,000.
Yeah,
So
I'm personally not comfortable with not RFPing, and I'm not comfortable with giving money outside of the city of Pittsburgh. When there's people that could do it in the city of Pittsburgh.
So they're already one of our contractors. So
No, I
they.
heard you say that. I heard you say that. Thank you.
You're
And
welcome.
I do believe, this is Adrian speaking, Chartiers, even though their actual headquarters are outside of the city, they serve city residents. They're not geography bound in the work that they do. They do work across the county, in the city, and their specialty
Some of our
is
city
working with
places
behavioral health
do work in the
consumers.
county. Just as some of our city places do work in the county, but I hear what you're saying. Thank you.
So if I'm correct in my understanding, these are funds that were previously allocated that just need to shift for HSP. They're just shifting from one provider to another because we've switched from 211 to the link, correct?
So these are funds for HOF 2021 allocation. So the $633,000 that was allocated for HSP. So these are the funds that we're sourcing instead of RFPing these out to avoid any delays in services.
So just to be clear, I appreciate the work everyone does. My concern is always going to be with the city. Thank you.
Kelly, these are 2021 dollars that were allocated to HSP, but not allocated to providers. So,
So we're
it is
dividing
not a
a previously-
reallocation.
Okay, so we're dividing up a previously allocated budget more specifically. Okay, I thought was my understanding. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page on that. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for URA staff, or are we ready to entertain a motion?
But to be clear, these funds are only being used for city residents.
That is correct.
Okay.
Also, I'm sorry, how does this all work? So we allocated the big number and then that number getting split up. We're just taking a portion of it because that provider needs more funds. Is that what we're doing? Or how will the rest of the funds be determined?
So we've allocated the $633,000 amongst these three providers. The two providers that have already gone over to DHS has more than enough to administer eviction prevention. So these are the three organizations that need a little bit more funding to continue the program to assist our city residents. Does that answer your question, Joanna?
I think so.
So are we at that stage where you are looking for a motion?
Yes, if there are no other questions, if anyone wants to make a motion to accept or reject this recommendation.
This is Sonia. I move to approve.
Thank you.
This is Adrian. I second that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions, objections, nays? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. We have one more housing stabilization program reallocation.
Yes, so in addition to the previous slide, we are looking to reallocate the remaining contract of JFCS to the YWCA to continue providing eviction prevention services to our city residents. As JFCS has unfortunately informed us that they currently do not have the capacity to continue working with HSP, but they will continue to let people know the program exists and get those residents connected to services. So this amount is a reflection of the non-committed funding that they currently have left. So we're looking.
So when I want to be careful with the language. Are we reallocating in the terms of we allocate each year's budget? We're not talking about reallocation. We're talking about reassigning or switching the funds from one contractor to another.
Correct. And this will be from the HOF 2020.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any other questions on this, or are we ready to entertain a motion? And if we are, if anybody would like to make one.
I move to reallocate the funds that were distributed to JFCS to be reallocated to the YWCA in the amount of $34,509.52.
All right,
This is Sonia, I second.
thank you. Do we have any, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Any abstentions, objections? Okay, this motion also carries. Up next is a discussion and a final vote on our RFP allocation, on our allocation plan for 2022. As you heard, we had a couple of quite a number of public commenters around a number of programs, primarily focused on the legal assistance program and our current allocation. Do we want to have any discussion on what we have currently proposed? We do have the ability, if we choose, to go back in to make some changes, but we are not necessarily obligated to do so. So I open this current allocation plan from last week up, from last month up for discussion or questions that anybody on the advisory board would have.
Kelly, so I missed the public comment. What is your suggestion?
So the public comment, we had in our discussions only allocated $250,000 to the legal assistance program because there was money left over from prior years to cover what we had thought would be the appropriate amount. But we had some folks from Neighborhood Legal Services, Community Justice Project, and Rent Help PGH who spoke earlier and said that they believe this allocation is going to be too low, that any carryover will be quickly expended with the ending of the moratorium and things of those nature, as well as the number of what has been expended being perhaps artificially low because it takes a little while to get into that billing, kind of rhythm. And so the recommendations ranged a bit, but it seemed to be that that it be around $600,000 seemed to be kind of like the middle number, somewhere a little bit higher, somewhere a little bit lower, to meet what would be expected to be the current demand over 2022-23. Was kind of, I think that, I don't know if folks feel like that was a fair synthesis, but that's what I gathered from.
Thank you. I apologize for having to have you go through that again. Thank you.
That's all right. I don't know if anybody on the board wants to add, but that's my kind of takeaway from that.
Kelly, this is Paul. That was a fantastic summary. And I actually really valued the conversation that came up, that sort of set the why behind why the thoughts of increasing those things. It would have been nice to maybe had that prior to our vote. And so maybe that's something we can begin to think about for the future. And I don't know what that process would look like if we wanted to rediscuss up, moving those funds up, because that would ultimately mean we need to pull from somewhere else. And it didn't seem like there was a consensus in that space, during our voting process or communication process.
Right. While we were voting, I think we were thinking that the carryover would be sufficient. Again, not being really into the weeds as our public commenters were. We could, in theory, open up the Excel spreadsheet live and move some numbers around. I know one of the things that we had discussed, and now that doesn't fully close the gap, was that demo dollars could be shifted to the legal assistance program if necessary. But of course, that would take us to 450, and it was recommended that we need, 600. Approximately 600. So that gives us, a 150 gap that we would have to pull from somewhere, assuming, of course, that that's what we wanted to do. But that's the only kind of area that's a little bit flexible, for lack of a better term. So again, I'm just opening it up to see what folks would like to do here.
I would also think that we might be able to shave the rest of that out of the small landlord fund. The other thing I wanted to point out, I don't know if folks read some of the public comment that was received on the website about the plan, but at some point in time, we need to, as the Housing Opportunity Fund, we need to get an accounting of the administrative dollars. You know, I know I've asked for that in the past, not for the past year or two, but when you look at the comments there are, you know, that was something that was the most unified. There are 2 or 3 comments there about $1 million is way too much. And I don't know if that's true or not. You know, some might think it's reasonable, others might think it's too much, but we have no way of judging that. And, you know, it's just like we never have that conversation. It's been kicked down the road. And I think that there needs to be a conversation about how those funds are spent. And are there other ways to pay for that? I don't know. It might be, you know, a bargain, or it might be too much. But, you know, when we're talking about people getting kicked out of their houses, you know, are there things we might be able to do for this year to switch some of those funds around? Might be another way. But, you know, I'm flying blind, because I feel like as an advisory board member, because we don't have any accounting of how those funds actually get spent. And, you know, it's been asked for, you know, I've asked for it several times, probably not over the last year or two, but, you know, I would certainly hope that we would be able to find a way to keep the program that's going to prevent people getting kicked out of their houses. You know, what good does it do us to build 50 new units if, you know, 150 people are losing their houses because they're getting evicted?
Well, we know I have a soft spot for legal work to keep folks housed. So I'm not going to lean too heavily on the scale. But would we be able to perhaps review the original URA? Could we put that on the screen? Perhaps the original URA staff recommendation, because I know there are some things that we had shifted around where it had the column where it had the advisory board's recommendation versus the URA's recommendation, because I'm kind of having a hard time figuring out which hash marks we were playing around in when we arrived at these numbers. And you know, that administration fee, I did read those comments as well, as you know, well taken. Although that is by statute, that 10% would be for administrative fees, but that's
it isn't by statute. It's up to 10%.
Up to 10%. Okay, so we can.
People think that that's written in stone. It could be 1%. I mean, and I don't know what that number should be. Maybe it
but perhaps we could get it sourced somewhere else, perhaps that other than this. You know, so.
So I do agree with Mark that we should have those numbers. I mean, I feel uncomfortable voting for things and saying things and moving things without a contract, without saying what the costs are for salary. There's just, I think we just need more information, period, because we have to answer to the public. And so I agree with Mark. And so Mark, I'll work with you on trying to get that information. Maybe we could hold up some of the money for the URA until we get our funding. Thank you.
I agree with the comment and with Mark's comments. I think I'm just uncomfortable with the fact that we had public comment today that's now inspiring folks to rethink one line item, which I think is important. But all of these line items are important, and each one of them play a critical role in this picture. So if we're really digging back in, a lot of the information that was provided by the URA was last year's performance of contracts as well. So where I think we always have the flexibility to move and to think through and to adjust, if we're going to reopen the conversation about one of these line items, there was quite a bit of debate as well on housing stabilization. There was quite a bit of debate on homeowner assistance. So how do we also balance, you know, the program that assists homeowners in making repairs is closed because we have so much of a waiting list. So how do we take all of that information back into an adjustment of this budget and this budget proposal and do that fairly? with just as much information as we got this morning from public commenters.
It does seem like that this is new information that wasn't provided when we were discussing the other items in the staff assessment. This wasn't provided, so I think it is worth considering. And I think the demonstration dollars give us some flexibility to move some things around, and I think it's better to do that sooner than later, so we're not in that crisis point, but the dollars are already there.
I think a lot of the information that was provided today is information that the URA might not have had access to because it seemed to be pretty internal to their billing pace, or just it seemed pretty particularized, which is unfortunate that we didn't have it earlier so that we could have had, I think everybody remembers the hours that we spent, kind of moving commas around here. And so I'm not entirely comfortable just doing it on the fly. However, I do want to put that out to everybody that is an option, that we do have the ability to do it. And I just wanted to have something in addition to the final product for us to look at, if that's something that we were going to consider doing today, or if we wanted to leave it as is in this slush-ish fund that is demo dollars. I don't know. I'm just putting out there what our options are to consider for today.
I think the idea of the demo dollars is that, if there's a crisis or there's something that needs to get done, I would argue we're on the press and we know what the crisis is going to be. We can see it's coming. The only reason it hasn't hit full force is because CDC has changed rules, and, that's all going to end, and that's not going to be a year from now. That's going to end in the next several months. So the bills are going to be coming due, and folks, there's not going to be enough funding from emergency rental to keep people there. And, how do you help folks stay in their units? We know that that's going to hit. So if we can use the demo dollars for what we can see coming as this tidal wave. Now, I would also argue the small landlord fund is something that's new, and it's can be a valuable program to try to do things to get more higher usage of housing choice vouchers. But maybe for right now, we got to shelve something new and try to fund something that just got up on its legs this year. And let's keep a program running that we know is going to be needed, and we can do that easily, I think, with demo and small landlord fund reallocation, some combo.
So then with
also the suggestion of benchmarking programs again to talk about, are there additional dollars needed? So we're also now, talking about figures that were put out related to the legal assistance, which again, I think is incredibly important. I am not debating whether or not it's incredibly important. But we got figures from an additional 400,000 to an additional 600,000. So we're also, targeting a number that I'm not sure is the number. It may be the number. I don't know if we know it's the number.
I think there's consensus that there's a minimum of 400 that's needed. Everybody that was presenting would, it might not be enough, but I think that there's agreement from everybody that presented that it's at least $400,000.
So would we want to perhaps shave a little bit from each of those two categories to get to that 400 and reassess at a later date? Because we have in the past shifted money as needs changed. That would be perhaps a possibility, is a little here, a little there, get to that minimum seems to be agreed number, because I do know we had some conversation around this as it happened. We were like, wait, why are we putting so little in here? And then there was like, oh, because there's a carryover, but understanding that carryover might not actually, it's not a true carryover, it's already expended largely.
So, and I appreciate that, Kelly, and I support sort of what you're talking about. I think we got new information that helped shape our thinking. And so I think that if we could consider that sort of shaping a little bit and then discussing that later, I like that as an idea.
And I'm going to say, I'm going to trust you, Kelly, because I don't want us to get in the habit of changing things because 10 public speakers come out, but there might be 30, 40, 50, 500 that didn't come out that have a different opinion. So I'm going to trust you on this one, and I'll follow your lead on it.
So how do we proceed if we wanted to switch these numbers around?
Well, I also think it's important, and I think, Council President Smith also said, if we're also massaging the admin line, that's not going to happen today. So that's also a discussion that could potentially put money back into the overall budget. So how are we thinking about those two pieces simultaneously, what we're doing today, plus this enhanced conversation about the administrative line item?
Council President, how long, when does council approve this? In December with the rest of the budget for the city, capital budget for the city?
I believe so, but I'll double check and verify.
Okay.
I can send it right now.
So
That's
that
my
means-
understanding too, but it has to go to the URA before it goes to council.
Right, so this could go to the URA board in November.
Yes, it could go to the URA board in November if we wanted to. We could, we don't necessarily need to rush this. We could have a special session getting into these weeds this month to give it to then represent in November, get it to the URA board in November. But that is a little quick and a little tight, but it still does kind of get us in by that hard December date with the city council. But again, sometimes we have a hard time getting folks together for a special session. So sometimes, so just throwing the possibility and then the challenge out there as well around a special session to dive deeper into these weeds. Whatever the group wants to do is, I see merit in both options, whatever you guys want to do.
So I have a question for the advisory board. If we were to postpone this by a month, what exactly do you envision happening within that month that you would like to see happen that would encourage public comment, or what would you like the URA to do that you think would help, either change or alter your opinion on this plan? I'm just wondering what kind of action steps you would like to happen within that month that you think would sway your opinions on this plan, or what kind of public outreach are you envisioning happening within that month or that time frame?
Well,
I personally prefer to just move this today. Moving, if there's enough of a consensus around moving those demonstration dollars to the legal pot. I think what the public commenters are saying, if we added 400, it would equal 650, which would be kind of level with previous years. So I think that was the request. So if we're able to move those demo dollars, that would keep funds even. So that would be my motion that we move today.
Okay.
I think that because demo dollars are flexible and we could move them later, I'd be more comfortable kind of waiting to see how things unfold. Because I mean, certainly the comments presented this morning were incredibly compelling, but I think, advocates for HSP or HAP could make similarly compelling arguments. And I'd hate to just completely eliminate or significantly eliminate the demo line item when we specifically don't know what might come up that we need to address.
But we also have past demo dollars that we haven't spent. So we're not, even
Sure.
if we eliminate it, we still have a chunk of funds that are, and even if we allocate it sooner, we're able to what did Mark's word? Move the funds once they're
Assign.
allocated, reassign.
What's our past demo dollars? What's our carryover? Do we have that number?
600,000.
Okay, because I too, Sonia, would be uncomfortable not having any demo dollars, because
Right.
that is what allows us to be responsive to whatever it is. But if we'll still have 600,000, then I think that might change that conversation a little bit. But we certainly
That's certainly a larger chunk than I had expected.
right. I'm like, what is there? Because if we have 0 demo dollars, I'm gonna I'm gonna have a slight panic attack. Because if anything happens, then we can't really be responsive to it. But if we have a 600 carryover, then that informs my thinking, I'll say.
And I did just check, Kelly, for the budget. It goes to the URA first, will come to us probably around December. But then it's approved by the URA board. It's just a discussion that will come up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Mark, was that a formal motion, or do you want to?
Well, Joanna, when you were talking about, there's 200,000 in the demo budget right now.
Okay, so moving the 200 from there.
And maybe another
then,
200.
can you pull up
out of-
is this the total right here, 20? I'm looking at the
2022
screen
draft.
with
The
all
farthest-
This is, I'm gonna move it to the simpler.
the
one.
far right.
This is the draft plan.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah,
Okay, I was
because there
getting a
was
little
someone
lost.
asking for the staff recommendations too, but this is the draft plan that was up for the last month.
Okay.
Okay, so if we move the 200 there, and then we have some funds from the landlord fund, what other things are happening with the small landlord fund? I know in the past we had other banks contributing. And can we move that as well?
Small landlord fund is currently very low on funds. We are likely going to have to close it, while at the same time we're definitely seeing an increase in interest from smaller landlords. The word is out and landlords are looking to reinvest in their units. So there is the demand, and without the HOF line item moving forward, the ability to implement this program and reach a higher level of units will be restricted.
What
You know,
about the
how-
other banks and funders?
How was that funded in the past?
It just rolled out in the last year, I think. We had a commitment from UPMC and internal URA sources. So we were able to roll it out and get a sense for the need, and there is a need, but we do need to find a reoccurring source of funds to support it, because right now there is not a long-term strategy. The income levels are up to 80% AMI. And so typical housing funds at the URA cannot support this. So, and federal dollars, when targeting the 60, 50, 30% AMI levels, is really a huge lift for these smaller landlords, asking them to go through compliance and review processes that a lot of these owners just do not have the capacity for. So utilizing HOF funds to target the 50% and 30% renters, it's just a more flexible type of source that these landlords can use. They're not the big developers that have the capacity to take on those requirements.
So I guess this follow-up question would be that this is if this number is required, or if there's some flexibility there, or if we just want to shift the 200 and leave everything else alone, I guess, is another possibility, and see how that flows.
Well, I guess maybe what we can do is shift it to total of 400 and then look at the demo dollars that we've got left for the small landlord program at a future date, at a future meeting.
Sorry, shift which 400?
We take the 200 from the demo this year. We take another 200 out of the small landlord program. And then if we want to have a discussion about the small landlord fund, we've got 600,000 in demonstration dollars that's left over from previous years, that maybe that's a good place to allocate it.
I would say I feel uncomfortable with that. I mean, these numbers, this discussion went out to the public. We stressed the importance of these programs. I don't know that eliminating the funding for one of those programs feels like it's transparent at this point. And again, we're opening up budget line items focused on one goal, but not necessarily talking about the impact of each one of these programs. And where they may be underfunded.
Yeah, how about we move the 200 from demo, currently allocated for demo for 2022. And should the need arise, we can look at additional demo funds for small landlord or any other programs. I would be uncomfortable with, at this point, after all of the discussion, taking half roughly of the small landlord fund away.
Is that a motion, Sonia?
Sure. I move that we reallocate 200,000 from the demonstration program to the LAPT program.
I second.
All those in favor?
Right. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain, Teresa.
Thank you. All right, looks like this motion carries, and we will set this in front of the board, excuse me, in front of the URA board next month, and move forward with this again with the ability to reopen and reshift things among all of our priorities as necessary next year. But we are, that is a significant chunk towards what was requested. All right, so our next agenda item would be advisory board administrative items. Our RFP committee reported out last, working group reported out last month. Our Fair Housing Committee had not met last month. We had actually taken a brief hiatus while the RFP committee spent some time figuring out how to operationalize many of the items that were priorities. And so there are some recommendations that came from that working group that will be given to the Fair Housing Committee to chew on, as well as how to further advance fair housing in a more strategic and thorough way in the advisory among the HOF. I'm not sure, we had established a communications and community outreach committee. I'm not sure if they met in the past month. Is anybody present who's a member of that group?
I think I'm a member of that group, and we tried to schedule a meeting, but it didn't quite work out, so we have not met yet.
Okay, great. And then there's just one more administrative item that came up as it tends to do at the beginning of these meetings, but around the actual language around quorum. So I was reviewing our bylaws that are dated January 7th, section 1 on voting and quorum. I just want to read that so that we can come to a little bit of a consensus around that moving forward. Excuse me. So voting participation, the expectation for member participation in the Housing Opportunity Fund board, and the number of HOF board members required for the board to conduct business. For 1.1 quorum, a majority of board members represents a quorum and must be present either virtually or in person in order to hold a vote. If there's not a majority present because of abstaining members, and a minimum of 5 voting members must be present to hold a vote. goes on to how people vote, that amending the bylaws requires 2/3 majority, and so on. So I'm thinking that it's for us to decide whether that is total number of seats available or total number of seats held. I would suggest that we go by number of seats that are currently held by people, so that is actually what I think would constitute a majority of members, even though it's not spelled out with more particularity than that. But I want to open that up for discussion so that we're all on the same page here. And this was as a result of whether or not quorum was 9 or 8, considering that we have 1 vacant seat. And so I just wanted to bring that back for everyone to discuss moving forward. So it's not us at 9 o'clock in November having the same kind of conversation while we're counting folks in
Is there
attendance.
something by code or by the law that says we have to have how it's counted?
So it just says board member, it just says members present. And so total members, and hold on one second, let me not lie. A majority of members, a majority of board members. And so we do have a vacancy, but we've been counting quorum as though that seat were filled to make 9, because that would be half plus 1, versus if we count it without that person present, which is 15 people who are currently serving on the board. That would be 8, because that would be half of 6, half of 16 plus 1. So that's, I guess, half of 15 plus 1. So I guess that is the question, as to whether or not we want to count that seat will be filled, but is currently not.
Will be, okay. I was wondering why it wasn't filled.
We have a vacancy and as our tenant representative, and I believe some of the thought process was that will be, as this administration winds down, that would be nominated perhaps, in January. So it will be filled, but in the meantime, we're holding quorum to a number that includes a person that is never going to attend, because there is nobody currently serving in that seat. So I just want to get some, have this be a conversation for all of the board members, so it's not just open to interpretation at the start of each meeting, so that we're clear on what constitutes a quorum.
Every board I've ever been on, you have to do the seats that are actually filled. I don't think it makes sense to do quorum based on the number that should be on the board. We don't have any control over whether these seats are filled, and we have to conduct business. So you really want the majority of people that are engaged, that are presently on the board. That would be my position.
Agreed. And city council meets, they have quorum rules. If there's 1 or 2 vacant council seats, they adjust the quorum. It's just like any other elected body. The state legislature does the same thing.
I think when we decided 9, that seat was currently filled, and I just wanted to come back to it because we did have 8 on the call for a minute, but we had 9 in our head, and was like, let's discuss this on the record as a full group so we can get some consensus on this, so we can move forward with that number. Does anybody have an alternative opinion that we should keep it at 9 because somebody will eventually be in that seat?
No, we can amend it later once they're in that.
Okay, so based on the currently filled seats, we're going to make this operate with quorum as number of board members based on currently filled seats, and for our purposes now, based on who's there, that will be 8. And so that concludes our administrative items. And thank you, Mark, for pointing that out. Give me a minute to dig in to find it written so that we could be in accordance with what's allowed. And now we have DHS and URA to make reports on our expenditures.
Andrea, are you still on?
Hi, yeah, I am on. So I could do a quick update on coordinated entry, but my assumption is the URA would have expenditure information as contracts aren't through yet on the DHS side. So there are 0 expenditures on the DHS side. Brianna, do you want me to do my programmatic update quickly?
Yep.
Okay, sure. So for those of you who are still getting to know me, my name is Andrea Bustos. I'm the Administrator of Resource Navigation and Community Supports within DHS's Office of Community Services. So we are still working closely with the URA on the transition of those administrative functions for HSP. There are a lot of moving parts as it's a really robust program. So we are pretty close to wrapping everything up with a bow. I also oversee the coordinated entry portion for HSP through the Allegheny Link. We did begin the coordinated entry functions of HSP on September 1st. We have not had an uptick in calls due to the transition. This was always our expected assumption, as the majority of households were finding their way both to HSP and the Allegheny Link prior to the switch. Of course, I'm going to keep a very close eye on this moving forward to make sure that any changes are reported out. We did have one provider that had capacity in September to request new referrals, and that was the Urban League. And we did refer 6 households to HSP in September through the Urban League. We had approximately 600 calls specific to eviction prevention or rental assistance from 366 unduplicated households. Of those, we targeted 25 to be placed on the queue for an HSP referral. As the programs are continuing to review capacity, to assist those folks on the queue, we are keeping a really close eye on those households waiting for prevention, and we will revisit if other prevention programs within the continuum of care through the homeless system have more capacity, and we can target them then to another potential solution. As I know, these are time sensitive situations, so we are keeping a close eye on that as the HSP providers get their capacity up. And that's my update as of month 1 being done for coordinated entry.
Great, thank you, Andrea. And then we can go on to the next slide.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Derek Kendall Morris, and I am stepping into the Manager of Consumer Lending role here at the URA. So wanted to go through our programmatic expenditures and impact slides. You all are familiar with the format of these slides over the past few months. So in the interest of time, I'll go through them pretty quickly. But down payment closing cost program as of October 1st, 2021. Total committed funds, 1,592,169. That's 68% of the total funding that's allocated for the program. Important call out here, of the 237 households served, 117 first-time home buyers that were between 51 and 80% of AMI. So that's a snapshot of that program at this time. Go to the next slide, please. Homeowner assistance program, total committed there is 9,295,593. That's 88% of the total funding allocated that's been committed at this point. And that's 317 households served to date. The next slide, please. And here are some of the other programs broken out, the for sale and development program, rental gap program at the different AMI levels. You can see the different number of units that have been supported through those 2 programs. Next slide, please. And then here's a breakdown of expenditures and impacts for all of the HOF programs for all the allocation plans that we've had since 2018, additional resources from internal URA funds, from different sources, and then what has not yet been committed for each program. Next slide, please. And this is the same breakdown of expenditures and impacts with the units that have been served for each program side by side, so you can get a sense of what that looks like on the ground throughout the city. Next slide, please.
Yeah, just a couple of announcements here. One, the standard, the next meeting for HOF Advisory Board is Thursday, November 4th at 9 a.m. on Zoom and streaming on the city's YouTube. But then also wanted to bring the public's attention to an event for Center Avenue Housing. It's their ribbon cutting, which is going to be taking place tomorrow at 10 a.m. at 2621 Center Avenue in the Hill District. This was one of the first ever rental gap program projects funded by the Housing Opportunity Fund. And they're completed with the project and going to have this event tomorrow. So anybody on the advisory board or watching this call is welcome to attend tomorrow. So I wanted to bring attention to that. I think this is just an informational slide, but the motion to adjourn, I think is, unless there's other questions, is ready for this meeting.
Move to adjourn.
Right, we do not need a second to adjourn. So that concludes our October Housing Opportunity Fund Advisory Board meeting. Thank you to the public for your robust participation and comment process, and to everybody on the advisory board for your thoughtful consideration. And as always, to the URA staff for your diligent work, and all of our presenters from the community. So with that, thank you, Councilwoman. So with that, I bid everyone adieu, and we will see you same bat time, same bat channel in November.